Good morning. My Wall Street Journal has arrived on my front porch. Some unknown person keeps throwing it further up on my porch. I'd like to find out who my great neighbor's doing that. But one of my friends must be doing that early in the morning when they're out for a walk. But I've got my Wall Street Journal. I think I've got a total of 9 articles, some of them very quick, that I focused on today, and I hope you enjoy them. There's a lot of great articles paper today, some of them pretty complex, a few that I couldn't understand. Certainly I'm not going to explain it to you if I can't understand it. And so let me get started. First, for some interesting statistics that I'm sure you're dying to hear, residential trash is up 30% since the COVID hit. So that may make sense because I think Americans eat like 40% of their meals away from home. So you would expect trash to go up when people are working at the house. So their trash that normally would have went into an employer's trash or a school trash for your kiddies, and increased meals at home results in more trash, and the cities are really struggling. That's a huge increase in trash when you think about it for cities. So they're struggling to keep up, and they've had some staff shortages because of COVID. You would think most of those would be passed by now. So an observation, you would think that overall trash would be about the same. And so you're saying, why is the city struggling to pick up trash? Well, maybe, and I'm not sure, maybe private trash firms handle schools and offices. I don't really know enough about that. Also, an interesting thing to keep in mind is that probably residential trash has a higher content of packaging. This is an issue that a lot of Asian countries have worked on. We haven't seen a lot of it worked on here except through Amazon. Some of the big mailers are working on it due to mailing cost, I think, primarily. But trying to package different things differently if they come through Amazon. Less marketing all over the mailing, and which drives more cost, higher weight, and much more trash. So, restaurants have less trash. Instead of getting eggs in a dozen, you get, in a flat of 48, probably, four times the quantity with probably only 30% more packaging. So I'm sure that plays into it. But it wouldn't be bad if Americans worked on less packaging. But right now, the marketeers run that. Are you having trouble staying focused at home? So some are finding it hard to concentrate at home due to various reasons. And so this self-help person wrote this article with some key hints I thought I'd pass on to you to try to make it easier to concentrate in your home offices. I think some of this relates to our children too, and I think we could pass it to them as they're doing online schooling. So I have to read right now because something important is happening out there. Set boundaries. This is an issue, and I have in my home office, even though it's just my wife and I, is when I'm in my office, working on a project, I can't handle quick questions. So these quick questions that come in, and you say, I'll just ask this one question, I'll be out. They really do upset a significant project that we're trying to focus on and trying to work on. So set these do not disturb type boundaries. I had an observation there. A lot of American homes are set up with open offices at the front of the house. And by that way, I mean open, typically they have no door. My office is that way, as an entrance twice the size of a door to get into the office. And so they're very open right at the front of the house, right where traffic exists. It makes it easier to walk in. And I think we're going to have to re-examine the kind of home offices we have in the future. I actually think there's a great opportunity for some entrepreneur there to focus on home offices and remodeling, setting up internet the correct way, setting up your faxing and printing and monitors and work desks. I think there's a great opportunity for someone to jump in there. I think it's going to be it's certainly driven a lot of the remodeling already based on some weekend programs I've heard. Some other things you can do to make it easier to concentrate: get a white noise generator. If background noise is affecting you, white noise generators can help. To-do list. Lots of huge increase in little time collecting to-do list type booklets, moleskin type books right now, and they usually recommend a 25 or a 45-minute schedule based on your ability to concentrate on projects. That works pretty well for lots of people. Pick one or the other. Take 45 minutes. You got 15 minutes before the next one kicks in, or 25 minutes. You got 5 minutes before the next one kicks in. Schedule breaks, and then get away from, walk around the block, go out and have a cup of coffee in the kitchen, living room, do something different. Know what works. So, I've got friends that have a TV on all the time in their office. Doesn't bother them. I don't have a TV in my office. I guess I could play it streaming on the laptop. I'm not sure that I ever have while I'm in my office. It's just something I don't do. But some people can handle that. You got to know what works for you. Music. Some people like music. They usually suggest it without lyrics, because you hear lyrics, you start thinking about what the lyrics are saying versus your project. So know what works for you. Have a desk and chair. The traditional setting works best. I see people working on their couch, in the bed. I can't imagine working in my bed. And first of all, because it creates real problems for your muscles and bones that aren't used to it, and you're going to become sore, and it becomes very distracting. Go back to the traditional desk and chair, comfortable chair. I think I'm going to work a little bit on that. My chair's wearing out, and I think I'm going to work on one of these newer chairs. And get a good night's sleep. So stay focused at home. Some good suggestions I think may work. Number 3, New York's Attorney General lays a rotten egg. So the New York Attorney General is combined with the Texas and West Virginia Attorney Generals to take aim at the egg producers. So if you haven't followed the price of eggs, in January, eggs were about $1 a dozen. By the early April, they were at $3 a dozen. So what happened? Well, people stayed home. And if people stay home, I guess they use more eggs. And all of a sudden, there was a supply problem. So the egg producers made a price adjustment to handle the supply restraints. So, if you look at what they did, and there's different distribution channels. So you say, well, there's so many eggs out there. The ones that went to restaurants and schools certainly can be diverted to the normal grocery store distribution supplies. Well, that's not easily done. As we talked earlier, there's different packaging, which is primarily the problem. Different distribution channels, the way they truck it, the way they handle it, the kind of eggs they even buy, the size of eggs they may buy. It's very complex. So it took a while for the distribution channels to change that supply, and for farmers to get more laying hens and to adjust to that. So it takes a little bit of time. In the meantime, a pricing adjustment in a capitalistic society is one way to handle that. But here's where you have people jump up and say they're price gouging. So price gouging is a very loose legal term. In some states, a 20% price increase during a so-called emergency is defined as price gouging. And you say, well, 20% isn't much. You're exactly right. So, and by the way, I've seen one state have a 10%, a law that says 10%. I forgot what state it was. And of course, most of these do-gooders are trying to help the poor because with price adjustments, new office and basements, Joe says, not a bad idea. Get it. For those states that have basements. Arizona, we don't know what a basement is, Joe. So your recommendation won't work out here. Thanks for the comment, though. So they say the poor suffers, and so price gouging hurts the poor, but it's a quick method to quickly handle. If you really need eggs, you'll get it at $3 a dozen. If you don't, you won't buy 3 dozen at $1 each, and that's the problem you have in supply restraints. So price gouging really conflicts with this economic formula that we've always called the concept we've called efficient allocation. Sometimes you must allocate so that the worse off are better off. And so sometimes, in some cases, somebody's not going to get eggs because they're too expensive. That's called efficient allocation. So what do? Do you limit on quantity? Some stores did that. Or you limit on price? Obviously, the distributors can do that. The problem with limiting on quantity is the retail stores have to be in on this. And sometimes they just assume the quantity to go out as quickly as possible. There to be a run on the product. The toilet paper is a great example. And be out of toilet paper and not have an issue anymore. So it's really a real big question. Personally, I don't even like the idea of price gouging. The only way that I would say it's really price gouging is when an adequate supply exists and you drive up the price because of the event. And there's some cases where water has been this a case of selling cases of water 10 and 12 bucks when it should be 3 and 4 in an emergency, when in fact plenty of water exists and you can get more water. So if there's not an adequate supply, I'm not sure where the price gouging comes into a play and where people should be fighting against price gouging. It's the way the market comes back and lets the marketplace adjust, and I think it works fairly well. So in the future, the risk of this is maybe that suppliers avoid the price gouging states. Egg suppliers are huge national operations, and maybe they just say, well, the places where we're going to run into trouble we won't send any supply. We won't have a problem with price there. They won't get any eggs. I think you got to be careful what the conditions are that get you in that. So I'm not a fan of legal fighting on price gouging. Let the market handle it, and people will substitute. There's substitutes for eggs, and there's substitutes for toilet paper. Some of you might not be old enough to understand either one. Number 4, Trump should keep his supporters out of Portland. So those of you who follow the news saw one man shot this weekend in Portland, I believe shot in the chest. He wore a portrait prayer hat. This is a kind of a right-wing group that clashes with Antifa. And so far, there's no video of it that I know of, or any evidence that Antifa shot him or whoever. But here's the observation. So far, it's been pretty clear that the Democrats have had to own the violence in these major cities. They've had all Democratic police chiefs, mayors, in many cases governors, everybody in charge of this city, and the city's been run by Democrats for a long time. So it's really hard for the Democrats to say that this is anything but their issue. Now, They haven't talked about it a lot, and you saw that in the Democratic convention where it wasn't mentioned, not once, not even one time it was mentioned. But so what happens is when you get a failure to police, vigilantism comes to the forefront because people need to protect property. So small business owners with no insurance and their life savings tied up in their small businesses grab their guns and run off to protect their businesses. So this is what happens when you have inadequate protection. And these cities shouldn't be surprised at what happens. You know, I know they've outlawed guns. Many of them don't believe in it, but they really should study history and know what's going to happen. So I'm going to protect what I need to protect. But when you do this, these tend to be conservative-leaning people. And now the battle changes between being a Democrat-controlled issue and Democratic-owned issue. Whether they want to own this or not, they've had to, and Trump is gaining over it. What happens when Trump supporters start joining the fight? Now it may be a political, a neutral issue where both of them own it. So it's interesting about the being a vigilante. I've talked this with various of my friends, and at what point do you become a vigilante? So at some point, many of us will get to that point. So is it, you know, the businesses in the town where I live, in the city, which is, you know, I don't live in the city. I live outside of the city, way outside of the city. So do I go down there and protect the businesses? Is it that level of vigilantism? Or how about my neighbors? They're attacking my neighbor's house. Do I go support my neighbor? Or do I draw the line at my front door? And I know many of my friends have said, look, I have a duty to protect my family and my house. And when they come in through my front door, then I become a vigilante because the police have, you know, that I paid taxes on to protect have not done that. So at what level, this is a discussion you might want to have with yourself before you have to make that discussion real quickly. And by the way, it's sad that it's in our country, we're getting to the point of having to decide at what level of vigilante do we become, when in fact, in years past, this is never an issue we ever discussed or ever thought about. Number 5, banks have lots of cash and little to do with it. The U.S. banking industry is really having issues right now. Many people, including the Wall Street Journal, is saying that's signaling a long recovery. And I think with the new news releases about increased layoffs and everything, we're going to, we may have a longer recovery because of some huge businesses that are laying off lots and lots of people, especially in the travel, restaurant business, bar business. So banks have very low profits recently. The net income levels back to the early 2000s, about 20 billion a year. That's down 70%. Down 70%. Huge drop in net income. It's odd because the fees are at an all-time high, and deposits are an all-time high, $17 trillion. In the last 6 months, people have added $2.4 trillion to banks' savings accounts, the cash that banks hold, $2.4 trillion. Isn't it odd that we hear that everybody's running out of money and we have to have this emergency Democrats want $3.4 trillion pumped into the economy, when in fact we've added almost that much to bank accounts, which are earning almost no interest. So, by the way, the banks have had to park lots of credit loss provisions. Credit loss provisions is what a bank needs to do to set off future potential losses. So banks have to look ahead and say, some of these loans we have, are they going to go bad over the future 3 months, 6 months? If so, we've got to set reserves aside, or what they call credit loss provisions aside. Right now, the average losses have been at 0.57% of loans. Less than 1% of the loans go bad right now and become losses. But banks are scared right now. And they're looking ahead and trying to set some more fees aside, some of that cash aside. So savings accounts are all-time high. You're hearing from more and more people that they've got more in savings than they ever had. Enough with banks. Number 6, UAL, United Airlines, is dropping the change fees, flight change fees. Competition. I love it in a capitalistic environment. No flyers, get competitive. Nobody's flying, you got to get competitive. So they're dropping that dropping those change fees. They'll come back at some point when they need more revenue and there's plenty of people to fill the airplanes, and they don't need to worry about people that need to change their flights. Number 7, digital coupons surpass paper coupons for the first time ever. You know, we've watched digital books surpass print books. We've watched different of these things happen in our lifetime, which I think are pretty interesting, and I keep track of them. And now digital coupons has finally done it. By the way, digital coupons this year at Walgreens are up 80%. I even have a Walgreens thing in my Apple Pay thing. So it shows up and they've got an actual thing in there and it captures all the coupons, all digitally. By the way, the observation I've had of this is that this will drive possibly less traffic through the post office, helping our election ballots get through very quickly because we have less of these paper coupons holding up the mail. So the Wall Street Journal still once a week has a whole folder inside my paper of paper coupons. I wonder if that's another sign if I start to see that go away. So this is another great plus from COVID-19, and I've kept the list separately, and I've published it a couple times out on my Facebook page of positive things that have come out of COVID-19, and you know, online grocery shopping. There's a lot of great things that have come up out of COVID-19 because the innovation of Americans that come to the forefront. So, by the way, history. So you say, when was the first coupon came up with? Well, this is interesting history. So it involved Coke. So one of the founders of Coke would write handwritten letters that were tickets for a free glass of soda at a local soda counter. And this was in the late 1800s. So that's the first coupons were for a free Coke. Not bad. Great history. Number 8, TV makers are increasing the revenue from ads. You say, how does a TV maker make money from advertisements? Well, this is an interesting part of the technology because now the TV makers have embedded streaming apps on the TV. And if you bought a new TV recently, I replaced my wife's TV in her office, her craft room, with a larger, better TV. And boy, when you power this TV up, the install procedures kind of forced you into, you know, setting up these apps. And I had to work to get around it because I'm an Apple TV user and I like their box. It's expensive, but it flat works and gets you around a lot of the issues with one TV in one room works differently than a TV in the other room because the included apps work differently. And by the way, they don't have the app you want because they're not releasing it fast enough, the software releases and so on. So I've kind of stayed away from that, but those of you haven't have seen the results of that. But they make money off the advertising space they sell on their streaming apps. And many of you don't know that, and that's a huge source of revenue. Vizio, the Vizio maker, the TV maker Vizio, doubled their ad revenue from last year already this year. Already has doubled it. And by the way, 90% of TV buyers of these smart TVs, that's what we call them, the smart, they have the apps built in. 90% of the buyers are using these apps. So very high sticky rate, and they're making the TV makers a lot of money. Isn't it interesting how where we get our revenue changes over time? 10 years ago, if you told Vizio that they would be making millions of dollars off selling advertisements, right? When primarily they carry cable and over-the-air channels, they'd have thought you were crazy. By the way, streaming is now 25% of TV watching. It's now 25%. So huge increase in streaming. It's still not there yet. Obviously, there's 3/4 of the people still getting it off cable and over the air, but increasing rapidly. Last article today that I pulled out for you is Facebook's political stance in India. So recent news where an Indian Facebook exec drew criticism due to some personal posts, which were in favor of Modi, the prime minister that won the 2014 election. So you got to wonder, when one of the exec in the country of Facebook has personal posts that are very political in nature and go all the way up to the highest position in the country, you got to wonder if Facebook really is neutral. Now remember, Facebook has always stressed that politically it's very neutral. By the way, she also posted a posting from another person that said Muslims in India have been a degenerate community. Now, she didn't say that herself. I want to make that clear. But she agreed with a separate posting by someone else that came to this conclusion. So, so a question would be for you is, do you believe Facebook is neutral in its political leanings? And good question for you to ponder. For what you've seen, do you think they monitor and pull out more conservative entries in Facebook, or more liberal, or do they do a pretty neutral job of taking both out? I think with the huge workforce that they have, it would be very difficult to make Facebook politically neutral. There's people in job positions that can do things that most people won't see. And you need smart people watching the technology from the outside to call them on it. More and more people are doing that. And I think you're going to find more platforms coming up. And I'm part of a couple platforms like that. Parler is one that's a Twitter competition that is staying out of that political and speech editing world that Twitter's becoming now. Okay, and by the way, you don't lose your privileges because you do something wrong. So, do you believe Facebook is neutral? Interesting question. So, thanks for joining me today. Hope it's been enjoyable. Hope I've picked out some great articles that you found interesting and that you can use to impress your friends and family. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks for joining again. Cheers.